victory from yesterday, 3 gratitudes. And what's your big rock for today? Has anyone had a chance to write something down? How about victories? Anybody want to share a victory from yesterday?
I came to work.
That
That was a good victory.
That's a W for sure.
that is a victory. Some days getting out of bed is a victory. Yeah. And were you productive while you were at work yesterday?
Well, I came to a class, I came to 75 Drive, and that was really good. Yeah.
So, anybody else want to share a victory from yesterday?
It's not from yesterday, it's from Tuesday.
Okay.
But we had.
No, we're very specific with our victories.
Because that's Tuesday, Alex. When did it? The rest of the week, it's a Tuesday and I'm not working.
We had 15 people in the room and then a few on Zoom, and we had people reach out to us immediately after the appointments.
Wow. Awesome.
That's good chills.
Yeah, that is awesome. Congratulations. Who conducted your class?
Jerry Nelson, he's done the NLP class here before.
He did more club a couple times.
Yeah,
Him and
he's
Ace.
amazing.
Remember him?
Super short.
Good. Awesome. That's good stuff. That's gonna be hard to beat. Anybody else? I had a victory yesterday. I took a listing.
Yeah.
Any day you can do a listing is a good day. So, yeah. How about gratitudes? What are we grateful for today?
The
Sun, love it.
yes, it's not windy.
Yeah, yeah. I'm grateful my house didn't fall apart. I live in Centerville. We had 65, 66-mile-an-hour winds last night.
Yeah.
I turned to my wife about 2 a.m. and I said, honey, I'm not sure we're in Kansas anymore. It was
Utah. We are.
Arguably you are now in Kansas.
either that or Erda.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which. Yeah, it was crazy. Nuts. Didn't sleep much.
It shook my house.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was crazy.
Yeah, at points it felt like the roof was gonna come off. And you got a little burst of air and you're like, where the heck is that coming from?
You guys can imagine being in a tornado.
Oh, no.
There's a reason.
You've been in a tornado. That's like one of my biggest fears. That and earthquakes. Smash over.
It opened where the sky east homes.
Yeah, that would freak me out. Couldn't do
I
that.
was grateful to Florida. With grizzly bears. Like, okay, out of my house.
I saw a meeting where the girl was like scraping off this much snow. What is that, like 2 feet of snow
Yeah,
off the top of her car? And she's like, we don't have tornadoes. We don't have. We don't have tornadoes.
We don't have
Like,
giant-
yeah, that's for true.
yeah, pick your poison. That's good. Yeah, I'm grateful we didn't have damage last night and, looked like the neighborhood was pretty good, but I know people did, so, yeah, interesting weekend for helping people that have had damage, so. Any big rocks for today? Anybody want to share their big rock for today? I know some of you have Easter egg stuffing on your plate for today, so good luck with that. Hopefully that goes well. Everybody gets their quota. Can you expand that, Eden, so that it's bigger on the screen? So today we want to talk about the changes that the UAR Legal Counsel made to our agency forms. So they redid both the exclusive right to sell and the buyer broker form. And the reason for this is because of the lawsuit. The NAR lawsuit, which we were named as part of. By the way, they announced this morning that the NAR settled that lawsuit for $418 million. And there's some conditions in there, no future lawsuits. So all of these copycat lawsuits that are happening in other states, including the state of Utah. There's a copycat lawsuit here in the state of Utah already. Those will all be taken care of through this settlement. There were some conditions in there that are in conflict with what we're doing here in the state of Utah. For example, our agency forms, it said that in the settlement that compensation was not going to be made available on the MLS. So that means our BAC, which is now BBC. So they renamed our compensation, is according to NAR, is not going to show up on the MLS. That's going to be interesting to see how they do that. Here in Utah, I think we are going to choose to probably continue doing it the way that we do it, because our forms and our legal prowess is so far advanced from everybody else. They picked Missouri because it was low-hanging fruit. They didn't have agency agreements and they didn't have advanced compensation the way that we do here. So they knew that they could win there, and they did. They knew that they couldn't win in Utah, so they didn't pick Utah to fight this fight in. But anyway, this is what we propose to do going forward.
So it's not gonna be written down, but will it still exist? You just have to ask the agents about it?
Like I said, I don't know how that's gonna be handled. Right now, UAR is saying this is the way we're gonna handle it. We are gonna continue to put it on the MLS.
There's two components to that. There's the private side that agents can see, and then recently they just made it a public thing. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, I really think we're gonna stay on track here with what we're doing this way. But if NAR says that we have to do it that way, then we're gonna have to figure out how to do it without putting it on the MLS. But for right now, we've come up with this new terminology, which we believe will take care of the problem. It was taken care of anyway. This just kind of solidifies the situation. So in the first paragraph on the buyer broker agreement, all we did on there is we just capitalized and put in quotations closing, so that the buyer knows that it either expires on the expiration date listed there or at closing. So that's when your buyer broker agreement expires. If you're under contract with your buyer and then the contract expires, what happens? Are you good? Or do you need to extend your buyer broker agreement? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Construction and you have 3 months there, you might be in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you are protected if you're under contract. Same on the exclusive right to sell. So you don't have to freak out about, hey, my deal's expired. I'm not going to get paid. Yeah, you're going to get paid as long as you're under contract and you have a protection period that takes you through that day in section 3 on the contract. Is it a bad idea to get an extension? No, I don't think it's a bad idea to get an extension. I do. I get an extension on mine just so that, because that's how analytical I am, but it's more clear and there's no question. Mhm.
Issues that prevented them from signing
Yeah,
So just taking that extra measure, like, obviously you don't wish anyone ill will or something have to be working, like, anyone can have something happen to them, and almost in a car accident,
yeah,
they can have the ability not to sign, and obviously, we don't know when that's gonna occur, but it would not hurt to extend your protection even a year,
exactly.
just so in the event there is something like that where someone couldn't sign, you're still protected. Or,
Yeah.
You know, I don't-
Yeah, good point. I mean, people die every day, people have strokes every day, people become ill every day. That listing I took, I was supposed to take 2 weeks ago, but the seller had a stroke and was rendered in a coma for 2 weeks. Now he's back, he's cognitive. He understands what's happening. We did get a power of attorney. His brother is his power of attorney now. So in case something happens going down the road, we're covered. But it took a couple of weeks to work that out. And if we were going to be closing, that could have been a problem for us because he needed to sign over the power of attorney. And if he's not able to do that, then we had to go to probate in this particular situation. The guy is single, so it would have been a problem. All right, so what we've done here is we've highlighted the sections where there actually are changes in verbiage. So could you scroll up, Eden, so that's at the top. So section 2.1, so let's just read through this. We'll talk about what's different. So buyer's obligation to pay a brokerage fee if during the initial term or extension of the initial term, the buyer or any persons acting on the buyer's behalf, so that could be a power of attorney or a spouse, acquires interest in real property as referenced in section 1 above, buyer agrees to pay. And this is where we made that capital now, because part of the problem that we got into with this lawsuit is agents telling the buyer that they're not paying the commission. Don't worry, you don't pay the commission. The seller pays the commission. It's true technically, but that happens through an agreement, okay? A third-party agreement, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But is the payment of the commission legally the responsibility of the buyer? Yes. Yes, ultimately, that is the buyer's responsibility. So let's call it what it is, and tell them that it is their responsibility. But here in the state of Utah, we have worked it out so that the third party, the seller, typically pays the commission. Now, they may not pay the entire commission, they may pay part of it, and we can have a discussion about that as well, okay? But it is the buyer's responsibility to pay the commission. We need to represent it that way, because that was part of the problem, is that the person that filed the lawsuit said, hey, I was told the seller was paying the commission. Then the seller changed their mind, didn't pay the commission. Then the agent went after the buyer for the commission, and that's why we had a lawsuit. Okay, because it wasn't represented correctly. So we want to emphasize that. So the buyer pays the commission or the brokerage fee in the amount of blank and blank. Why do we have two spaces? Because a lot of agents charge a transaction fee. So you put your transaction fee in there where it says dollar amount, $2.99 or whatever you charge for your transaction fee, and then the percentage of commission that you want to be compensated with. Any questions on that? Okay. 2, satisfaction of brokerage fee by third party. This is totally a brand new section. This did not exist prior. So it says if a property acquired by buyer is listed with a brokerage on the multiple listing service, the MLS, the buyer brokerage compensation, which we've changed the name of that. It's now buyer brokerage compensation, not buyer brokerage.
Agent commission.
Yeah, we changed it to BBC. So you hear people refer to BBC now instead of BBA or buyer's agent commission. Paid by the company by the listing brokerage shall satisfy buyer's obligation for the brokerage fee as shown above, provided that the BBC is equal to or more than the amount shown above. Okay, so it's conditional. It's conditional whether it's gonna satisfy that or not. In the event the BBC is less than the brokerage fee or any compensation offered by the listing brokerage or property owner to the company is less than the brokerage fee, the buyer may negotiate. So here it is, the buyer may negotiate with the property owner and or the listing brokerage to satisfy the buyer's remaining obligation to pay the brokerage fee. So how does that happen in the real world? How does the buyer negotiate with the seller on the brokerage fee? Say that
You
again.
would use the commission request form
Okay,
to
through
submit to the
escrow
selling side.
instructions. Or there's another form called the commission agreement. So there is one form that you can use, and it has the proper language in it, because it's unethical to address commission in our agreement unless you use that specific form that has the specific language in it. Because basically what it does is it says the buyer asks the seller to pay a portion of their obligation under the buyer broker agreement for compensation to the agent. So it's buyer to seller, not buyer to listing brokerage. Okay, so it's still between the two principals. They're negotiating the commission. So you got to have that specific language in that agreement so that it stays ethical. Okay, and that the right parties are involved in that negotiation. Anybody used that form before and had success with it? Okay, good, good. Yeah, that's a great way to do it, because in that way it comes directly from the buyer to the seller. Buyer shall pay any remaining difference at closing. So if the seller's not going to cover the entire amount listed in section 2.1, then it tells the buyer, you're going to pay the difference of the brokerage fee at closing. Okay. Now, you as an agent, that's your choice. We leave that up to you. We don't dictate what you pay, because that would be price fixing, which is what we're accused of doing as an industry. We allow that up to you to charge what you want to charge. Okay. We believe that all of you here are worth, a 3% commission, but we leave that up to you. We can't dictate what you get compensated. Any questions on that?
The way this is being read is if we put a 3% commission down there and we get a 2% listing that we're putting an offer on. This says that they will come up with the other 1%, period. There is no negotiating. Shall means that it's definite. It should say may, not shall.
Well, it says that it's very strong, and it says it's their obligation. But then there in the third sentence, it says buyer may negotiate with the property owner. So
To get the property owner to pay the difference,
Mhm.
right? But if the property owner just says, no, I'm not.
right,
This is saying the buyer will.
yes,
Period. No,
Yes.
no negotiating. I can't come back and say, according to this, what's 2%? I'm not worried about it. According to this, if I said 3% and I only get 2, they will pay, period.
that's correct. Unless you did,
Or we were to kind of like, 2%, I ain't.
well, and the way you do that is just do an addendum to the buyer broker saying that you'll accept the 2% as compensation, brokerage compensation. So that's how you address that, is you change that.
Shall means definite, there
Okay.
is no negotiating.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
we could check with the attorney, that's what shall mean.
Yeah, well,
It's crazy to me,
Wait,
'cause
but you can
when
identify.
you had this contract the first time,
Mhm.
there was no question, like, this is how you explain it to the client, that like, if you don't get paid 3%, I'm gonna try and negotiate that, but if there is a problem, it's the saying that you'll pay the other up to 3%.
Mhm.
Like, that's how I always explained it. I get that somebody ruined it, and now we have to have very specific, and so this is nice, but like, it just blows my mind how many agents weren't explaining this in the beginning, cause it was always there.
because they
I
did-
felt like,
The longer you do this, the more blown.
yeah,
your mind
and
will
like,
be
it
at
just
how
blows
little-
my mind. This specific, but I get why we are, and it's so
Yeah.
good, but yeah.
It's because of the agents that don't find value in what they
Yeah,
do,
just-
and they can't
well,
justify, they're uncomfortable trying to justify to their client that they're worth 3%. So they avoid the conversation totally by saying, oh, the seller pays the commission, don't worry about it. So that's a blow off, because that's not what the agreement says. The agreement's never said that. It's always said that the buyer pays it, but we've had to drill down on that to get more definite and more specific because of the lawsuit.
But in reality, me as a listing agent, I am paying that. That's part of how I'm marketing the house. To bring other agents, as I'm giving that commission, I'm going into a listing like I'm 6% right off, like minimum. So it just, I just like,
Yeah.
You know, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It just does them a favor, why would you want to
Why would you
give
not
them less?
Yeah.
want agents to bring people to your house?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, I was gonna say to that, and the the same thing is, obviously, you can addendum to anything that in any of these contracts, that's where we have addendum to clarify that, but one thing I'll say to my clients, I will show them, while I'm sitting with my buyer couple, I'll let them see the clear cooperation that we have, like, they'll see the bottom line, here's the BBC or BAC, right? This is what the majority of what we're seeing, this is what we're seeing them offering, and our job as your representation to negotiate a three, what our agreement is here, the 3%. If we can't, then we'll have a conversation of what that looks like. At the end of the day, I want you into that home and, we have representation so we can negotiate on it.
Yeah.
And after I have, they're like, oh yeah, you can't work for free, like that, like they never pocket it, and we never charge, like I told them, if it's less than 2.5%, we will really need to figure out that gap, because at that point, we are kind of working for free by somebody, everything else. But we've never had to have that, but anytime we bring that up on set, they're like, oh no, we'll figure that, like, you're not working.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
have that.
it's because they find value in what you're doing for them. And that's awesome. And that's the way we should do our business.
Does his buyer broker, he ever does his, class, again, I highly recommend everyone attend that, because I love how he presents. He'll present the buyer due diligence form first before he presents the buyer broker agreement, because it provides even more value. He's like, here are due diligence items that we're gonna be covering for you when we get to that point of the transaction. There's 21 items that we know about that we're gonna cover for you, and help provide that value. But by the time you get to talking about the money piece, you're like, oh wow, you're doing all of this stuff for us, and now it's like, oh, where do we sign? So anyways, just a little tidbit there, like,
Yeah.
we,
I second Blaine's buyers class.
yeah. like,
Really
we
good.
will watch how we
Yeah.
present that, and
Yeah, it's good. And, we do a lot. I handed out the other morning at a breakfast we had, not many people got it, but I think it was like 181 things that we do as agents in a transaction. It's mind blowing, so I take pieces of that and put that in my presentations, because we do a lot for our clients, but I mean, it was eye-opening to me what we do. So the question is, can't you put 3% or as offered? Yeah, you could, but what happens if it's a homey listing and they offer 1%
Or
Yeah.
$1.
or $1? So that cuts both ways, Jamie. I would not recommend that. I would put 3%, or whatever your business plan says that your compensation is. And then just amend that with an addendum if you get down the road and it's not gonna end up being 3%, okay? All right. Let's see, we talked about 2223, brokerage fee due and payable. Unless otherwise agreed on writing, buyer and the company. The brokerage fee shown above shall be due and payable on if a purchase. The date of recording and documents closed, if a lease, effective date of the lease. So those of you that get into lease with an option to buy, you get compensated when that's inked. And a lot of agents don't know that. They think they've got to wait until the option is exercised. You get paid a second time when the option is exercised. The problem is that a lot of listing agents don't do the addendum to the ERS, which tells the seller, hey, you're gonna have to pay the commission. You're gonna have to pay part of the commission upon lease, and you're gonna have to pay part of the commission upon the option. And the other thing is that if you're the listing agent with a lease option, make sure that the option money that is put forward is enough to cover your commission and to cover what the seller needs to pay at the time they exercise it. I see all the time that $1,000 option money is put forward, but then $4,000 or $5,000 worth of commission is owed upon lease, upon execution of the lease. So then what happens to the seller? The seller's got to what? Come out of pocket for the difference. Are they happy about that? No, they're going to come back to you and say, hey, why didn't we get enough option money to cover my expenses to do this deal? Why am I having to come out of pocket with the commission? Because there's two commissions owed on that, okay? If an option, the date upon which the option is signed, like I just said, and then the other portion is paid when the option is exercised. If the transaction is prevented by default of the buyer, so in other words, if your buyer cancels, buyer becomes ineligible for their financing, if it's the buyer's fault, the deal failed, they still owe you a brokerage commission, even though it did not close. You did your job.
2.1.
Mhm.
So how it's, in the budget, and interested in real property as a one. And I'm assuming we just an addendum to this, but let's say we find this buyer broker agreement with a client, and then we get out there showing homes, and then they decide, you know what, maybe I wanna look at a mobile home instead. And that's not considered real property.
Right.
So at that point, if we get them under contract on a mobile home, or even if we're starting to even show them mobile, should we do an addendum to this stating that buyer still agrees for blah, 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 to pay, or like clarify that on
Yeah,
the mobile?
Exactly. Yeah, so you do an addendum to your agreement that just says that section 2.1 is amended to say that if buyer or buyer's representative acquires an interest in real property or personal property. Yeah, perfect. Good questions. Okay. Let's see, prevented by the buyer, the brokerage fee shall immediately be payable to the company. So you still earn your commission whether they close or not. Brokerage fees, and this is in bold, brokerage fees are not set by any board or association of realtors or MLS or in any manner other than between the company and the buyer. So there is not price fixing. No one dictates that you charge a certain commission. So that's in bold print. So that's an addition. Okay. So now we've got, let's go down here to section 7. So dispute resolution. Parties agreed that any dispute related to the exclusive buyer broker agreement arising prior to or after the acquisition of property may, at the option of parties, first be submitted to mediation. So we just clarified what mediation is and did a little bit better job of explaining mediation. Doesn't say we have to mediate, it says we may mediate. They can choose to sue, but our position as a brokerage is it's always better to mediate than it is to sue. It's cheaper, it's quicker. I don't know whether you know this or not, if you haven't been to court lately, but if you go to court, even small claims court, which is up to $11,000, they call your case and you go up and you stand at the dais, and the first thing the judge says to both parties is, have you mediated? And if the answer is no, he says, see that conference room over there? Go over there and hash it out. And when you're done, come back and see me. But my expectation is that you guys are adults, and you're gonna go mediate this, and you're gonna settle it. So he puts you in a conference room and he goes on with his docket for the rest of the time, and you guys go in there and you try to mediate it. It's not the best situation to mediate it when you're under that kind of pressure. It's better to do it in a relaxed, less formal atmosphere. And so we always recommend you try to mediate it before you sue. Okay,
Wasn't the option may or shall before, and now it's just may?
in the rep C, you have the option.
Okay.
It says shall or may, but here you have the option as well. It says may. Okay. So, all right, may at the option of the parties first submit to mediation. Mediation is a process in which parties meet with an impartial person. Those mediators are often attorneys that will agree to mediate. They're sometimes paralegals, but they do work for a law firm and they have a degree in law. And so they're the mediators. To resolve dispute informally and confidentially, mediators cannot impose binding decisions. So it has to be agreed between both parties. In other words, the mediator is not going to say, well, in my opinion, you win. It has to be something that's agreed upon by both parties. They sign a mutually binding agreement when they've agreed. Okay, it's not something the mediator says. They don't voice their opinion. They're just there to facilitate conversation back and forth. Anybody ever been to mediation?
Not
So-
heard one yet.
Yeah.
I have.
You've been to force, you've been doing a mediator.
18%.
You've been.
Yeah.
I only have one more to go.
Yeah, so it's quite a process. The parties to the dispute may agree before any settlement bindings. Parties will jointly appoint an acceptable mediator. So basically, the way it works is you get a list of names. Both parties agree upon the mediator, and that's how the mediator is chosen. Is that you're provided a list of names and you both choose, okay?
That's why it's like contract law so well. and Because I've had to be an attorney for the 15 years. I'm not lying.
Oh, no.
You have more experience than I do. You should be teaching this class. All right, so that's, we just go in and we explain mediation a little bit better so that people understand that, you know, it's not binding. All right. So here in section 8, where it talks about attorney's fees, we added this last section where it says class action waiver. So section 8 is the same, where it talks about the prevailing party is going to win attorney's fees. And then we added this little sentence here at the bottom where it says buyer forfeits any or all rights to participate in a class action against the company. In particular, buyer agrees not to be a representative or member of a class of any class of claimants or act as a private attorney or act as a private attorney general in litigation, arbitration, administrative proceedings with respect to any claims arising out of this buyer broker agreement. So by signing this agreement, they agree that they're not going to join a class action lawsuit.
That's currently
Mhm.
going on. So they-
Or
they
or
could-
or to propagate one.
Okay, so they
Yeah.
probably can't propagate like.
And that's it. That's.
How you get away with it.
Yeah, and then down here in section 14, where it talks about the entirety of the agreement, we added that, we added a language on here as well that says any provision of this exclusive buyer agreement is declared by a court of competent jurisdiction to be invalid, illegal, or unenforceable. Such provision shall be severed from this exclusive buyer broker agreement, but the other provisions shall remain in force and effective to the fullest extent possible. So let's say that a buyer did sign this form, they were unhappy, they wanted to join a class action lawsuit, and they went before the district court and asked the judge to rule on this agreement, and the judge sided with the buyer, and he struck this last sentence out of section 8, where it says they forfeit the right to participate in a class action lawsuit. That would be stricken from the agreement, but the rest of the agreement would stay in place. Because that's all it's saying, okay? We've reviewed this. Our legal counsel has reviewed it. The Attorney General's office reviews all of our forms. That's the final authority for all real estate forms, is the Attorney General's office. And we believe that this is a good form. We do believe it's defendable in court, but you never know. You go to court, it's a crapshoot. Those judges are humans just like the rest of us.
They don't think they are.
And they think they're superhuman, don't they?
True.
But you never know. You never know. They have their own prejudices and opinions, and unfortunately, sometimes that bears out in how they rule. It's
These forms.
they're on the MLS, so you can start using them. I don't know as if I haven't been able to verify whether they're on DocuSign yet in your library there. I'm trying to verify that. We don't control that. The region controls those forms. So we'll find that out. If you go there and you don't have the class action language in the forms that are there, then use the ones off the MLS. Go that direction for now. And then I'm gonna find out when and if they've been updated, and if they have been, we'll let you know. Okay. All right, so exclusive right to sell. So in paragraph 1, We just emphasized ending. So where it talks about that this agreement is in force until a certain date and certain time. We just wanted to reinforce that it's at 5 p.m. on that day that the agreement ends, okay? Then down in paragraph 2, we added this language where it says that the seller has negotiated with and agrees to pay the company a brokerage fee in the amount of blank and percentage. And then it defines that just like it did in the buyer broker agreement. The brokerage fee, unless otherwise agreed upon by the seller, shall be paid at the acquisition of the property. The brokerage fee, unless otherwise agreed to in writing, the seller and the company shall be due and payable from the seller's proceeds on A, if it is a purchase, the day of the recording of the documents, just like it said in the buyer broker agreement, an acquisition of property, which we define as closing. So we added closing there. So it's defined as closing. If a lease, it's effective when the option is agreed to and signed. If within the listing period or any extension of the listing period, the property is withdrawn from sale, transferred, conveyed, leased, rented, or made unmarketable by voluntarily act of the seller without written consent of the company, or if the sale is prevented by the default of the seller, the brokerage fee shall still immediately be due and payable to the company. So if you've got to the point where you have gone under contract with a buyer and the seller backs out, the seller cancels and defaults, you're still owed a commission. Okay, you've done your job. You need to be compensated. Okay. Then it goes on to say, additionally, the seller has negotiated and authorized the company to share a portion of the brokerage fee as advertised on the multiple listing service with another brokerage participating in any transaction arising out of this listing agreement. The company shall offer brokerage compensation on the MLS of blank or percentage of the acquisition fee. The amount offered on the MLS may be modified only with the consent of the seller. So if you're changing the BBC, you need to do an addendum to the exclusive right to sell, changing that. If you're taking more of the commission, or if you're giving more commission to the buyer's agent, that needs to be done in writing. That's not something that you can just go in and nilly-willy change on the MLS. That has to be done in writing with the seller. They control the compensation. Okay, so I want to make sure that we understand that. Brokerage fees are not set. So here we just added this language again. Brokerage fees are not set by any board, association of realtors, MLS, or in any manner other than between the company and the seller. Okay, so we just want to make sure that's clear. Then, very important, I see this missed a lot on the documents, and we ask you to go back and correct that. But we need to have the seller initial that paragraph right there, because it's so important on the compensation that we need to get their initials right there, saying that they have read and they understand paragraph 2.
So this little section here is where you have got to be, you've got to know right when you're signing this, what you're giving the buyer's agent, because once it's there, you can't go back and go, oh, they want it, I'm gonna do 4% to me,
Yeah.
2% to them.
Only with an addendum.
It's
to the-
right here, and this is what you're getting.
Yep. Only with an addendum to the ERS, you can go in and change the compensation.
Done that. Nice.
You'll find one.
Like those buyers, I changed that.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, I mean,
Never.
I think if you've been in the business anytime, you've had those particular listings where you feel like you've earned your commission 3 or 4 times because you've been under contract so many times, you've shown the property so many times. And so you do feel like there needs to be a little bit more compensation coming your direction. then the buyer's agent, that's fine if that's agreed to by your seller. Just do an addendum to the ERS and do it there and then make the change on the MLS. Yeah, we all do that. I mean, that's pretty common.
I think those initial sections should be color coded, so that way we never like.
That's a
skip
great
over
idea.
it.
Why don't they just
I don't
simply
know.
color code it? Yeah.
Why not?
Why
Red,
not?
bright red, initials.
So on this,
Bold.
on this agreement,
Yes.
on this agreement, section 7, we've added the same language about mediation. It's the same identical language, so I'll spare you in covering that, but we just explained a little bit more in detail that how mediation works, that the mediator is not going to impose something on both parties, that it has to be mutually binding, mutually agreed to. And so we just go into a little bit more detail on mediation. And then we've added the same language to section 8 as we did on the buyer broker agreement, talking about the seller forfeits any and all rights to participate in a class action against the company. In particular, the seller agrees not to be a representative or member of any class claimants or act as a private attorney general in litigation. Private attorney general means that you're the principal in the lawsuit. That's all that means. It's legalese for, you're the instigator of the litigation. Arbitration or administrative proceedings with respect to any claims arising out of this listing agreement.
So that's saying they can go after the agent, they can't go after Keller Williams, right? Is that how I'm reading that? Like, you can't bring the company, AKA Keller Williams, into the suit, but you could go against the agent?
Well, yeah, but what are you gonna get?
Yeah.
Your pockets aren't quite as big as.
In none of these lawsuits,
Based on what I know,
Can I explain that?
yeah, sure.
Okay, so in law enforcement lawsuits, we were named in lawsuits called the deep pocket theory. So what they're saying is, you're right, they can't come after the company, which is not time to waste to come after the company. But when they sue the company, they still gotta sue the agent to get to the company. Just like if one of my officers messed up, they can sue the officer. They would sue my sergeant, my corporal, my lieutenant, my chief of police, and the city to get there to show the progression up there. That didn't mean that my officers or me or anybody else was getting sued.
They're all Karens.
They just, we're all just listed in that lawsuit, and ultimately they're going after the deep pockets.
Yeah.
So what this is saying, my interpretation of this is that you can't come after the company, and they're not gonna come after us. We don't have anything.
Yeah, there's no point. The money's with the company. In the lawsuit that was filed nationally, I believe Gary Keller was the only one that was named individually in that lawsuit because, he's the CEO of the company and he has means. The one that's filed in the state of Utah, there's no individuals that are named in that. It's all corporations. So it's that shotgun theory, like Chris said, they're gonna go after everybody and kind of join everybody together, and then you fight it together as well. So, all right. I think that's pretty much it, then we do have this in that same language as far as the entirety of the agreement, that any provisions that are deemed by a court to be illegal or unenforceable will be removed from the agreement, and that the other provisions within the agreement will stay in force. So it's just that thing of that we can disagree on one item, but because we take one item out of this agreement, that doesn't mean that that the agreement is invalid. Okay. Any questions, Christie? Uh-huh.
On section 13, people health opportunity, it's in both of them, it's section 11 on the buyer broker, but section 11 or 13 on this one, equal housing opportunity.
Mhm.
I think that section on both agreements gets skipped over so quickly and easily, and I don't think a lot of agents understand the equal housing opportunity, because it's like one sentence on there. But how I explain that when I'm meeting with either party, buyer or seller, whoever I'm representing, I help them understand, the importance of equal housing, but I also help them understand, a couple years ago when we received love letters, that's goes along with equal housing and the fair housing regulations, right? And so I explained to both parties that, you know, because they may have heard of those love letters.
Mhm.
And I just help them understand, like, that is a violation for housing. We will not be writing love letters. We will not be presenting love letters. And I have that conversation on the onset when I meet with them. So that we can have that frank conversation and protecting them because of the losses that have occurred since COVID and all of that. So I just wanted to mention that because I don't think enough people understand what equal housing opportunity really means in a section.
Yeah.
But is there anything on there that, I mean, am I understanding my?
Mhm. Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of it, but yeah, it's the thing that we don't discriminate against people because of, you know, their marital status, their gender, you know, all that stuff, and yeah. Well, so go on to explain why the love letters are problematic.
Because when they were getting submitted, people would submit a family picture or whatever, and a letter. And so it went both ways. Either the seller felt like they had to choose, they were using emotional connection to make a financial decision. And also if the buyer didn't get their offer accepted and they found out that love letters were being, and they found out like the family that went in there was your typical for that neighborhood family, and they didn't fit that neighborhood, that they were discriminated against.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because in the love letter, you know, most of them had pictures, so it's obvious you're revealing the buyer's ethnicity. You're revealing the buyer's marital status. Yeah, their income status, their familia status. So. Yeah, and so, you know, we have like 6 protected classes. And in those love letters, you're exposing at least half of those. And so that was the reason why it was problematic. So yeah, we don't.
People lied on those letters too. We have this struggle and this struggle, like, we only need this house, but I feel like maybe they embellish.
Yeah, you know, I probably need to do that in a compliance class, is actually go over equal housing and do a deep dive on what that really means, because it is a more complicated scenario than just that. And we do need to refresh ourselves on that, you know, because it is important that we not discriminate against anyone. Everybody has equal access.
And maybe more importantly, clients understand what they can do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll see if maybe there's some little pass
Been very
along thing.
uncomfortable in a couple of listing appointments. Let's not say that ever again around me.
Found that section to be so interesting. You look at the whole contract and it's the only section
Yeah.
in the whole contract that's one sentence.
One sentence. Yeah,
When the front- As we're moving forward even.
Yeah.
it's one of the things that we be mindful about. The consumer and our clients about is, you know, what equal housing means.
Yeah.
So many components.
exactly. At a minimum, we should have the protected classes listed so
Yes.
that at least it gives them a general idea.
I would have-
Yeah, you are.
You should be able to pay just well for it.
So Jamie said, our seller of the land, we purchased, required a love letter from us. I thought it was weird, but we had to explain why we wanted their family land. It's crazy as an agent now to understand how wrong this is. You know, and the problem is that, you know, sometimes our sellers are gonna ask us to do that. And we've got to counsel with them as to why that's not a good idea, but like in Jamie's case, sometimes you don't have a choice, so, you know. But you yourself can't discriminate, you know, that's the thing, is that you can't discriminate, so that's the thing, just keep it so that you're not participating in that. All right, any questions or concerns with what we've talked about today? You know, it's pretty straightforward, but the extra language I think is important, that protective language on the class actions, on explaining to the buyer, it is their responsibility. They do have the right to negotiate with the seller on the commission. And so that's good. And then telling them when it's due and when it's payable. Even if they pull out and default, they still owe a commission. It's up to you as an agent as to whether you want to go after it or not. You know, you have to ask yourself that question. You know, do I go after a commission on a failed sale? and perhaps burn a bridge? Or do I let it go and hopefully represent them down the road? And that's a business decision you have to make. And only you can make that decision. We'll support you in any way you want to do it. We help our agents go after those types of commissions. Sometimes it ends up having to go to court. Unfortunately, going to small claims court and suing them for the commission, but you know, we'll help you in any way that you want us to help you. That makes sense. So that's just a business decision you need to make. Any questions or concerns? Okay, thanks for being here. And yeah. Next week, we're going to talk about contingencies. So what are the contingencies that we come across in transactions? And how do we deal with those contingencies? Subject to the sale of the house, subject to finding a replacement property. You know, all of those kinds of contingencies. How's the best way to negotiate those and navigate those? That's next week's conversation. Okay. Okay, thanks. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks for being online. Have a great day as well.
You never heard that.
Thank you, Karen. Have a good day.
I remember that, now that you think that.
Are you going to your next Reels idea?
Yeah. I'm Stephanie, the temporary. Bring it.
Ken, I'm finally meeting with that client today.
Which one's that? Oh, really?
Dave Ramsey,
Yeah.
Evan Mallory. First time home buyer. I think it's been a year. So. They're planners. That's what I like about them.
Yeah.
They're planners, they're strategizing. They want to
Yeah.
They will make the best
Be
decisions.
successful,
They want
doing
to
it.
be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So we get to start.
You know,
They don't.
So I'm just gonna go over.
We must. Can somebody that they
Fire market, you know, we can kind of just fine tune what it is they're wanting, but. Yeah, I know, I'm gonna tell you, Billy, hey, for both of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll have a check coming eventually.
Want some more of those?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Wait.
How many, how good, I was able to do this. With your